Good day, everyone, and welcome to our Smart Webinar series. Very excited today's webinar. Another at bat, how to rescue a missed opportunity. I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Sterling Weiss. Sterling is a Senior Business Development Manager for Marchex. Sterling's digital media career was launched when he landed a GM position overseeing a small operating unit of a local multimedia company. And over the next 10 years, Sterling led the unit to an annual revenue growth from $450,000 to over $10 million. Since then, he's led revenue teams at Autotrader.com, Amazon.com, and other companies. Sterling's a longtime resident of the Pacific Northwest and attended the University of Washington. When he's not bringing value to the senior living industry, Sterling can be found trail running, playing soccer, pretending to know what he's doing on a golf course, and spending time with his energetic beagles. So welcome, Sterling.
Well, thank you, you guys. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm really grateful for you folks attending, taking time out of your busy day to join us today. Hope to deliver a message today that's of particular value to you and some takeaways that we can pursue in your day-to-day routines as we move forward.
All right, let's kick it off.
Shall we? So the topic again today, how to rescue lost opportunities. Basically, the goal here is how do we get a second chance at a blown opportunity. So a little bit about Marchex to start with, because probably not everyone on the meeting today knows who we are. Marchex has evolved over the last decade plus. Started out as a call tracking company, primarily aligned with Fortune 1000s. Today, though, we have we are a call analytics company. Basically, we enable our customers the means to see what's happening on calls that they're generating. We process over 1 million senior living calls through our speech AI every month. Annually, we'll do about 300 million calls across our platform in the industries we serve. 300 plus headcount. We are definitely a technology company, of mostly geeks up in the Seattle area. Half our headcount is engineers, programmers, and the like. We typically right now are really aligned heavily in industries that highly value phone calls. So from this visual you can see here, we're deeply embedded in the telco space, cable, satellite. You think of industries that highly value phone calls like automotive. Travel is a big industry for us, financial services, home services. Think of industries where consumers are calling a business because they have a distinct need and a problem they need to solve now, kind of thing. Marchex thrives in those environments. Currently, we have about the number is over 80 senior living brands that currently use our data in some way, shape, or form. So let's talk about the issue at hand here, which is what is the value of a phone call? You're spending a lot of marketing dollars to drive calls to your senior living communities. Every one of those calls, particularly the sales calls, have this moment of truth. This customer's calling, they have a need, and as you well know, these people are oftentimes a little stressed out, kind of flying blind in this whole senior living thing. But in the event your sales team is successful, that could mean a huge revenue boost to the organization. The average lifetime value of a lease is anywhere, clients tell us, from $120,000 to well over $300,000. The thing that's interesting about this industry versus some of the others I mentioned, though, is the calls you're getting inbound, you're getting a lot of noise. And you think in terms of callers that are, looking for a job, prospective employees, family members calling to speak to grandma, that kind of thing, are unique to senior living, and other industries just don't get the volume and noise that we do in senior living. So the opportunity to hit a home run, if you will, during this moment of truth is really critically important in senior living. Across all our clients in the senior living space, we find that about 1 in 5 calls fail for whatever reason, and I'll dive into that in a little bit. But again, another reason why this moment of truth is so critical is because there's data that shows that 75% of folks that call will end up booking with the first person they talk to. So get it right, they're yours. So like I mentioned, we all are really working hard at the organizational level, at the community level, to ensure that every caller gets what they need, right? And we want to get them what they need as quickly and efficiently as possible to enable a great customer experience, build trust, and hopefully convert on that 75% number I spoke of a minute ago. But a lot of the disconnects happen for reasons that you can't even control. For reasons that at that community you don't have availability. Maybe you have a waiting list. Or whenever the caller calls and wants to make an appointment to schedule a tour, it's not available. Or they're calling after hours. Or a number of questions just simply aren't handled correctly. This industry experiences sales churn. You have sales reps that are coming and going. They're constantly being trained and trained up and so on and so forth. And you can't have your best rep handling every call all the time. So you have an inexperienced rep who is unable to answer the questions effectively and gain that trust. There are a number of reasons, like I said, why calls fail, and not always is it your fault. So people are calling, they're showing intent, they're expressing interest for whatever reason. Some of these calls are being missed. They're blown opportunities. They're a swing and a miss, to use a baseball analogy. So how do you identify those best missed opportunities? So Marchex, frankly, uses an AI-infused call monitoring classification, if you will, solution. Basically, we're going to bucket the calls that are coming in one of three ways to determine where these missed opportunities are. And I'll show you what those look like here in just a second. The goal here is to take those calls that meet a criteria of meeting in an intersection. Imagine a high intent caller expressing interest in a tour or checking availability on a 2-bedroom, calling, getting transferred to sales, and they sit on hold and they're unable to get what they need. So at that intersection of high intent and lost opportunity is where we see the gold. So again, let's talk about this journey, this customer journey for a sec. So you're getting dozens, if not hundreds of calls a month to your community. But as the data showed at the onset, only a small percent of those calls are really legitimate, really high value sales calls. The salesperson they want to talk to, the person they're interested in getting information from, isn't available for whatever reason. The goal here is to identify those missed opportunities, capture that information, and push an alert, whether it's email, text, or even an API, to your organization, so someone who's capable can call that person back in near real time and get another at bat. So what do these look like? Well, I mentioned a moment ago, we are going to bucket these calls. And into your organization, you're getting 3 different types of calls. The one we refer to as noise is frankly the biggest segment of calls. We're not particularly interested in those, and frankly, neither is your sales team. So we consider those neutral calls. A positive call is that ideal scenario where it's a highly valued, highly intended caller that actually gets what she wants. She speaks to, say, Debbie at the front desk. Debbie couldn't be sweeter, transfers to sales. Andrea picks up, has a wonderful conversation. They engage, earns trust, and they get the appointment for the tour. Where we're interested in helping is with this negative outcome. Imagine calls that caller calls, shows intent, really interested, and doesn't get what she needs. We're going to bucket those calls through our AI and then filter those calls down to a human being in a call center who's going to scrub those calls again, listen to the call as quickly as possible, assess, yes, in fact, this call is highly rescuable, and then fire off that alert. This disposition view you see on the left is an example of what this alert looks like. So we're going to time, date, stamp it. We're going to refer to the specific community. We're going to make a reference to whoever was spoken to. We're going to summarize the reason for the call. You have the means to click a tab and listen to the call in its entirety yourself. You can view a transcription, more details if you need. We've also provided a scorecard in real time so you understand, again, at a high level, who called, why, what was missed, where was the opportunity missed, and so on. So then the rescuer, if you will, the person designated to call this person back, is armed with what they need to have an intelligent conversation and do it quickly. And once the call's been handled, the rescuer, for lack of a better term, can then designate in the UI, hey, was this call saved? Was it not saved, and why? Add additional notes and more context for training purposes, whatever it might be. So hopefully that gives you a quick view of what the alert itself looks like.
So just quickly, in terms of the rescuer, so there's different ways of identifying like who that alert should go to. Mm-hmm. So if the salesperson is out of the community, it could go to an executive director or someone else on the sales team, or for people who might have internal resources, that they could elevate it to maybe someone who's taking internet leads, someone who's always available, or even to a call center, perhaps if you have a relationship with a call center. So there's kind of lots of models about how to create your rescue team to save those sales.
Yeah, Debbie, that's a great point. And even in senior living, we've seen a number of different models executed. From, to your point, I've got a call center scenario. I've got my ace sales guy or person in the sales, call center. We assign these to. We've seen situations where, we're a large player with a national footprint, and these calls are assigned to a regional sales manager, for example. We've seen situations where it's used as a tool, as an incentive program. Mm-hmm. So you hit your number, or you're the top salesperson for the month. Guess who gets these highly warm, highly intended sales calls to close? They're oftentimes kind of your one-call drop kind of situation. Mm-hmm. What sales rep wouldn't want those as part of their reward package? Anyway, so yeah, there are a number of ways. Just really depends on the organization and what really fits that organization best.
And these alerts come in pretty quickly. Like if you find like you can get these alerts back in like 15 minutes, and if we can reach back out and have another attempt, given the additional information and kind of coaching on the scorecard, you're finding that there's still a good percentage that can be re-engaged and converted.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's interesting. The numbers are pretty impressive. And the thing that's intriguing is the typical community doesn't get a lot of these alerts. I mean, as we spoke of before, on a daily basis, maybe you're getting a couple dozen phone calls a month, or a day, maybe, to the community, right? And a small percentage of those are actual highly valued phone calls, and then even a smaller percent of those swings and misses, right? Mm-hmm. So within those, that small percent of calls that meet the criteria of another at bat, of an alert, we're really talking about a scenario where a rep is dealing with one, maybe two alerts a day. Yeah. Per community kind of thing. It's not a huge number. So it's utterly manageable. Just the value and the return on that effort is astounding, because again, these are high intent customers, genuinely interested. We dropped the ball. Let's recover it. At any rate, so yeah, it's a great sales training tool as well, and I think we can kind of venture into those tools a little bit. But this dashboard you're looking at here gives a view within the tools of, we've received these calls. How do we stack rank them and prioritize them for return calls? One thing that is interesting that we've been asked in the past is, what are customers who are calling that we miss on? What are their thoughts about us calling them back? Do they feel like we're stalking them? It's a legitimate question. And the answer, what we found overwhelmingly, is they're shocked. They're blown away. Oh my gosh, I left kind of feeling down, like you didn't love me, and now you're showing me that you do. And it just totally flips the script, if you will, and that caller's attitude about your community, because they left a moment ago thinking you didn't love them. Right. Now they're finding, wow, we really do care. So it can be really powerful, this additional at bat, if you will. So hopefully that gives some insight into how we're seeing the senior living space not only handle the calls, but the effects from a kind of a branding standpoint, customer experience standpoint. Yeah. So I want to give you some, everybody's, okay, well, what does this look like in the real world? So here's an example of a client we have currently, and this is just a small sample of the communities that they currently have. We've changed the names, if you will, on the screen here to protect the innocent. but should give you a sense for what this looks like. So the size of the bubble represents how many calls over this 30-day period the respective community got. On the horizontal axis, you can see what was the recovered tour rate of the calls, these alerts where the customers were called back. And on the vertical axis on the left, you can see really how many alerts this represented. You can see the number here over a 30-day period is not even one a day in some cases, in most cases. But the recovery rate is pretty solid. I think it rolls in about 31%. So the numbers are pretty decent with regard to, gosh, if I can get a 31% conversion rate on commitments for tours overall, you'd be pretty darn happy.
It's
right?
worth calling them back. You can convert 31% to a tour.
Yeah.
So you look at the top bubble, and obviously lots of volume, but also lots of missed opportunities, and a pretty low conversion rate. So I mean, that could point out you've got to go back and do some retraining, reinforcement. Maybe it's a new salesperson, but then you can also look at, for instance, a little bubble on the far right, which I think is Mount Fairweather, and it looks very fair indeed. They don't have so many alerts because they're handling them correctly on the first attempt. So there are fewer save opportunities, but their conversions are higher. So do you have an ability to kind of listen in on what's happening with the interactions at the best community, and then figure out how that can benefit all of the other communities to do better?
Yeah, Debbie, that's a great question. So this data can be used any number of ways. Obviously you want to get a sense for how your teams are these recovery reps are performing at the location level, but it also gives you insight into, a more holistic view into the communities and how effectively reps in general are handling calls. And sometimes it's the reps. Sometimes it's just an operational thing. Maybe we have an IVR that's confusing. Calls aren't getting answered in the first place. Is that a sales thing? Is that a front desk thing? Is that a staff thing? So there are a number of ways to look at it, but Marchex provides tools that gives you really detailed insights into why calls are failing as a sales context.
Even down to the dates and times that we're missing. So
Correct.
Maybe we can adjust staffing for salesperson scheduled Tuesday through Saturday. We're getting a ton of missed calls on Monday, maybe taking a look at that.
Yeah, looking at, again, 1 million calls a month, we've seen a big trend around the biggest failed call day of the week is Monday. The hour of the day in which calls are failing is over the lunch hour. So what that tells me is consumers are doing their research over the weekend, right? And I go into the office on Monday, I've got a lunch break, I'm calling that community to ask questions. As it happens, the sales team is at lunch too.
Right.
Right? That doesn't work.
Yeah.
Right? So what do? I'm calling your competitor.
Yeah.
Hopefully they're not at lunch. So here's another view, just kind of stack ranking the performance of the individual locations. What you can see here is, they're basically, recovering about $55,000 annually per location, based on the median here. And that's based on data over this 30-day period. So where this is really compelling, though, is one of our clients did a 30-day launch. They're a mid-sized player, but we only piloted 10 communities initially. And over that 30-day period, those 10 communities generated about 3,000 calls, just over 3,000 calls. But of those 3,000 calls, just over 800 of them were legitimate sales opportunities. But within those 800 calls, nearly 100 were blown opportunities, those missed opportunities. By implementing the rescuer, the call rescue program, they were able to resolve or save, if you will, 22% of those, or basically 22 calls. Based on their conversion metrics, though, on the average lifetime value of a lease versus calls to leases conversions, if you will, they determined their average revenue per appointment was about $2,000. Through the pilot of these 10 locations, they figured they recovered about $25,000 in revenue. But if they were to take those numbers, scale across their organization, and annualize it, they're forecasting they're going to recover about $2.3 million in revenue this year or next 12 months. And these initial numbers might be interesting, they might be even compelling, but that 2.3 mil number really leaps off the page to me. The reality is they were looking at it across their entire footprint, but what our data is showing in these programs we're currently managing and whatnot, we're finding that really about a third of the communities in a senior living brands portfolio are really great opportunities for sales rescue. We're getting a lot of calls for these communities, and as it happens, the reps we're failing, a disproportionate number of times. And then there's another third where, yeah, we're getting good call volume, but we seem to be doing a better job of handling calls, giving consumers what they need when they call. But there's still the missed opportunities where sales rescue makes sense. And then on the trailing third are communities that probably aren't a fit, to be frank. They're not getting a lot of calls. Maybe it's for whatever reason, maybe it's a smaller community, maybe they have a waiting list and the community's not being marketed, that kind of thing. So we find that the programs are breaking out in thirds as far as the footprint, and the model is where is sales rescue relevant and beneficial and driving huge ROI versus communities that don't. So 1/3 awesome fit, another third good fit, and the trailing third probably don't need to think about it.
So a couple quick questions that come to mind. Number one is, do you have like an average traffic volume? So for folks that are listening to this webinar, trying to figure out, well, which third am I in? Mm-hmm. And is this right for my community or my portfolio? Does there have to be a certain number of sales qualified calls coming into the community or call traffic volume? Mm-hmm. Or is it a matter of if your occupancy is at a certain point, or if you have a new salesperson that may be under 3 months mm-hmm. old, or maybe no salesperson because you're in turnover? Mm-hmm. Like, as you look at, the qualifying, who really fits into mm-hmm. that sweet spot, like how would you define that?
Yeah, so great question. So really where the best data is coming from is if I have a community or communities that are driving, say, a minimum of 1,000 phone calls a month.
All phone calls, not sales phone calls, just total call volume.
That's a perfectly suitable starting point. So again, if I was interested in trying this program with a community that gets 200 phone calls a month, I'd say
not enough volume.
Probably not a fit. But we have 5 communities or 10 communities, and they're driving in excess of 1,000 calls. I'd say that would work great.
Okay.
Good way to measure.
And then just a clarification of, on this slide where it talks about, the 98 calls where there was the missed opportunity on the first attempt and sales rescue is implemented. Just clarifying for everybody out there that the 22 rescues, when we say rescues, what that means is that tours were successfully scheduled mm-hmm. of those 98. So it wasn't like a continuation conversation where you just kind of re-engage them and got more information, but something didn't happen. That 22 actually represents 22 scheduled tours. So as I'm looking at the ROI as a sales manager, I have a couple things that come to mind. One is that most of the studies are showing that, it costs anywhere between $500, $700 to make the phone ring. So to drive that initial opportunity. So if I take a look at, I got 100, even mm-hmm. conservatively times $500 mm-hmm. investment to get that phone to ring, there's that revenue, mm-hmm. right? And then if I take a look at what does it cost to schedule a tour, usually around $1,200 to $1,500, there's 22, there's mm-hmm. that opportunity. And then if I look at lifetime value, if I take a look at those 22 that were saved, and maybe we have a 40% tour to move-in ratio, mm-hmm. Now I have, a move-in metric that I can calculate out the lifetime value. Right. And I think as we're looking at, making an operations mm-hmm. Conversation out of it, it's really all about, revenue and ROI. So just for everybody out there, that's, 22 scheduled tours mm-hmm. that happened just by calling them back within 15 minutes. Pretty cool.
It is cool. But to me, Debbie, that's obviously where the low-hanging fruit, the gold is. But there are other kind of intrinsic values I see as well, which is, if I were to ping any of the attendees of this webinar and say, hey, let's go online and check your online reputation, for example.
Yep.
We might be disappointed to find how many 2- and 3-star communities there were.
Mhm.
Setting the bar initially is important, right?
Yeah.
So if we call these people back, instead of, the risk of a 2-star, posting or something, now you're at a 3 and a 4-star, just because you're showing you care. So this is part of the culture, I think, that it's important to our brand as a senior living brand that we're doing all we can to deliver a killer customer experience. And I think this is kind of fosters that culture, right? We're going to do all we can. We're not going to be content with blowing these opportunities, right?
Agreed.
So guys, we've burned nearly a half an hour. So the goal here really was to help you understand that, you're missing opportunities at this moment of truth that are just so critical to the revenue objectives of an organization when a customer calls. And you're failing at times due to no fault of your own. It's just the way it is, right? You implement the best practices in the world, but somebody's probably having a bad day. Someone stepped away from their desk. Not every call is being answered. But even in senior living, with this unique situation where an unusually low percent of calls coming in are high intent, the value of those calls is so high that you've got to get it right. So wouldn't it be awesome if there were a way where you could get a second at that? Know that today there's a solution for that.
Right.
Okay. So that's what we were hoping you could take away from today's presentation.
So I would say if you have any questions, go ahead and put them into the questions panel. I always have questions. So, so my question is, are you just listening to the connected calls, or are you also able to rescue calls that end up in voicemail, or that actually hang up because they don't want to wait forever on your little elevator music? So can you give us a sense of what types of calls you can rescue?
Yeah. So we think, pretty much I'm going to make a bold assessment here that everyone listening right now is familiar with call tracking. What they may not be aware of is that in the case of Marchex as a call tracking provider, we're using a layer of artificial intelligence to virtually ride along in this customer journey, right? So we know through these various high intent signals that are relevant to senior living. For example, I went through this experience earlier in the year with my dad. He's nearly 7 years in with Parkinson's, and I had to find a place for him. I thought going in, I know this industry. This will be a slam dunk. No, wasn't the case. So yeah, calling a multitude of different communities, homes, what have you. There were great experiences and there were not great experiences. There were situations where I would call a smaller community and the phone would ring and ring and ring and ring. And that's not helping anybody. But in the instance where I do speak with someone, or I'm prompted with an IVR, hey, press 1 for sales or 2 for, wellness or what have you, we are capturing the intent of that caller in that journey through our AI. So in the conversation, if I call a community and I say, hey, I'm interested in knowing availability of a 1-bedroom for my dad, timeline, pretty immediate, Marchex has captured that data, okay? And now we've identified this is a high intent call, but I didn't get what I wanted, right? I didn't speak to someone who was able to answer my questions and I hung up, right? Or I was put on hold or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? So now I'm at that intersection of high intent and lost opportunity. That meets our criteria with the AI across all the calls that come in. And then that filter goes down to a human who, again, listens to the call and fires, if it confirms the fact it's a rescuable call, fires off that alert. So it's near real time. We like to say it's 15 minutes because it could have been a long call. Who knows? So hopefully that helps.
So just to put it into like a real life scenario, the salesperson is out doing outreach and doing sales calls, and they're out of the building for the afternoon, and a call comes in to the front desk, and the person just leaves a voicemail and says, I'm calling because my dad's going to be discharged from rehab on Thursday, and they just told me that that's really not best for him to go home, and I'd like some information. And they hang up. that call is not going to sit there for hours while until the salesperson comes back from the sales call. It's going to, your system is, your artificial intelligence is going to pick up on those high intent keywords like discharge, rehab, more information, those types of things. And it's going to then say, this is showing all of the signs of a high intent call. I'm going to send it to the call center so a human being can listen to it. It's going to get scored, and then it's going to send whatever the elevation is to the rescuer. And within 15 minutes, they're going to have that opportunity to call back.
Correct.
Meanwhile, the salesperson's still out doing outreach, but there's another person that can be identified to do that. Same with hangups, right? So somebody just gets tired of listening, even though they don't even get to the voicemail or get to the salesperson.
Correct. Yeah, if I'm sick of the Jeopardy hold music.
Right, but they've said something to the concierge that says, I'd like to call and schedule a tour, or I'm calling to get more information from my mom. Those words are going to trigger, first of all, that this is a sales call, and then kind of score the level of intent and decide if it's worth escalating or not.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So, so I guess the next question is about, do you have a poll question for everybody?
Yes. So we're looking for people who would like a pilot of sales rescue. And if you would like a pilot, I'm going to go ahead and
the poll is open.
do the quick poll.
We're open for business.
Select one.
If you'd like to have a free demo and try this out for yourself and see how many opportunities you have to rescue calls, we're very happy to be able to offer that through Senior Living Smart, that we can offer these free trials. Because I think this is a kind of thing that's kind of so new to the industry that, and it's kind of experiential. Like, I'm not sure I get this. I really want to understand, but I really want to understand with my data and taking a look at my my calls and my prospects. So if anybody would like to try it out, definitely let us know with the poll question, and we are going to close the poll question now. So we appreciate you attending this webinar. We will be sending out a follow-up, which will have a recording, some other collaterals and information for you to learn more, and Sterling's contact information. So thanks so much for attending today, and we'll hope we'll see you again on another smart webinar.
I love it. Have a great day, everybody.
Take care, everybody. Bye.